ever was. To catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. I will travel across the land, searching far and wide. Each Pokemon to understand the power that's inside. Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all. It's you and me. I know it's my destiny. Pokemon, oh, you're my best friend in a world we must defend. Pokemon.
Welcome to the Geek BAH Reviews. I'm the Geek BAH Brent Hausman, here to bring you my review on the Pokemon Generations. This review will be different than some of the others because, it's not a top 10 list, it's not an overall discussion about something. It's going to be me ranking the 6 different generations of Pokemon in order, of worst to best. So, I'm going to be going over things like the goods and the bads of the Pokemon, actually in the generations, legendaries, gym leaders, elites, trainers, enemy team, that kind of thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I can't make this video too long. And that being said, let's just go right into it. So in 6th place, and by no means is a bad game, it's just my least favorite, Generation 4. Now this is Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. These games are universally called the worst of the series, but still, they're not bad. They're just not the best. So let's look at the Pokemon. Generation 4's Pokemon were good. They were good Pokemon, but they weren't great. I mean, you had pros. You had the Chimchar line, the Shinx line, the Shieldon line, definitely the Gible line, and the Riolu line. Those lines of evolution in the Pokemon were just really good. But Generation 4 also had some really bad ones. All the starters besides the Chimchar line were kind of crappy. And the Cranidos line, the other evolution, or the other fossil besides Shieldon, wasn't that good either. I mean, the design was good, but the Pokemon itself wasn't. And then pretty much everything else in this generation was just not good. Whether it be for the design or just how useful it is in battle. Honestly, Generation 4 was a big letdown with its Pokemon. And then Legendaries. Now, I am not a Gen 1er. I'll begin with that. I'm not a Gen 1er. However, I do believe that Gen 1 and 2 did have some things right, such as Legendaries. In the first 2 gens, being a legendary Pokemon meant something. It was special, and you were so much stronger than everything else. Starting in Gen 3, that started to go away, and in Gen 4 was probably the worst. Because Gen 4 had 14 different legendaries, and I'm not going to go through naming each and every one. But when you have 14 legendaries, when you have that many legendaries, it kind of takes away the value of it. I mean, think about it. Having that many legendaries, they're just not that special anymore. And they obviously, through the game, were not as strong as legendaries should be. Especially considering what you had with Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. The legendaries should have been so much stronger. But they were kind of a letdown. Outside the legendaries, the gym leaders were honestly really weak in the 4th gen. I couldn't find a challenge with any of them. And that's not a good thing, considering the gym leaders are supposed to be, really strong. And the elites weren't that great either. The elites were obviously stronger, but still not strong enough to really give me a great challenge. Now, the enemy team. The enemy team, honestly, they were just really unrealistic and pathetic. Their goals were just so out there that they weren't even possible. And they just weren't entertaining to me. They weren't believable as a good enemy team. Now, I could go on ranting about it forever, but this is just my opinion, so don't get me wrong here. Generation 4 is, in my opinion, the worst of the generations, the main games, but, I mean, it's still good. I mean, I'll still play it again. But it's just the worst of the 6. So moving on. In 5th place, Generation 5. Easy to remember. The Pokemon in Generation 5 were great, but they were not amazing. And you had pros in Generation 5 like Victini, Fire Sidekick. That's a great combination. You had the Blitzel line, the always popular Roggenrola line, the Darumaka line, both fossil Pokemon in this generation, and of course, Braviary. But then you had cons as well. You had the Pokemon that weren't as great. Pretty much all the starters. All the starters in Generation 5 were not that great. I like Oshawott personally, but even his line wasn't a great line. But you also had the Patrat line, the 3 monkey lines. I'm not going to try and remember their names. You know, the Grass Monkey, the Fire Monkey, and the Water Monkey. And then you had Woobat, the new Zubat. As if Zubat wasn't annoying as hell as it was. Now you have to bring in a Zubat clone. I mean, don't we have enough Pikachu clones? But yeah, Woobat, pretty much useless, just as Zubat was, until it evolves. Just like Zubat. Once it evolves, it's good. But you get the point. Now, Generation 5 also had way too many legendaries at 13. Only one less than Generation 4. Generation 5 really missed the mark there because it's a good generation. It just had so many problems with it. I think it tried to do too much at once. So yeah, way too many legendaries. Again, they didn't really mean a lot, and they should have been a lot more powerful for being that they were legendaries. Now, the gym leaders weren't as bad and weak as in Generation 4, but they still weren't challenging enough. And the elites were obnoxiously more powerful. I mean, when you go to the elites, you're not expecting them to be that powerful, and it's kind of unbalanced. I mean, you go to these gym leaders who are fairly easy to beat, but then you go to the Elite Four and it's like, holy heck. But you get the point. I mean, obviously, there's always exceptions to these if based on type matchups and all. But moving on. The enemy team in Generation 5 was actually really good. I really liked the enemy team. This was the one big saving grace. I mean, with N and Getsis and all that, and their story, the big castle, it was just really good. And I liked it. But that was their only big real success with Generation 5. I mean, yes, they had some great things. They even had the fully 3D city, but that was only the one city, which obviously, of course, moved into Generation 6 being fully 3D. But you get the point. Generation 5 was really good, but again, it just wasn't as good as the others. In, I believe this is 4th place, Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. This generation, for a lot of people, is the first generation they've ever played. I guess just with the age group or something, that was just the games coming out when they started. Doesn't matter to me. The Pokemon in Generation 3, like Generation 5, are great, but not amazing. And you have awesome pros, like the Torchic line, in my opinion, the best starter line yet. The Poochyena line, the Nuzleaf line, Ralts line, Slacketh line, Aeron line, and Absol. Absol's enough for the rest of them. But cons, the other starters besides the Torchic line weren't that great. And I know, sue me, I don't like Mudkips, but yeah, I really don't. The Wingull line is horrible. I mean, it's almost as bad as Gyarados with the water flying, doubled weakness to electricity. But Gyarados is strong. Wingull and Pelipper suck. Anyways, continue on. The Skitty line, for being so ridiculously cute, Skitty's line is just weak as hell. Volbeat and Illumis are really, really annoying when you're fighting them, and at the same time, they're They're sad when you use them. And then the fossil Pokemon in Gen 3 just, I don't know, they just didn't catch my fancy, I guess you could say. Gen 3 also had too many legendaries. This is really where it began with having too many legendaries. It had 10. Not as much as Generation 5 or 4, but still too many. Now, the gym leaders were actually really tough, but they weren't impossible to beat, and I like that. I actually really like the gym leaders in Gen 3. And the elites were really strong as well. They were where they should have been. However, the enemy teams, there was diversity with Team Magma and Team Plasma. Or wait, oh. Wow, that was horrible. Team Magma and Team Aqua. Ignore Team Plasma. There was diversity there, and it showed a sort of counterbalance to things, which was interesting. Both teams had their separate goals and their separate ideals. And it was definitely different, but in the end, I think it was executed wrong. It could have been so much better. But it was executed, and it was a little boring and stereotypic. I mean, you had the Team Aqua. They were pirates. I don't care what you say. Team Aqua were pirates. I mean, just look at Archie. He's a pirate. And then Team Magma are just the stereotypical villains. And honestly, I don't remember the name of the leader of Team Magma, but he's a snob. He's just a snobby, spoiled brat type character who thinks his crap don't smell. You get the idea. Moving on, though. In third place, the first generation. This might surprise some people, as first generation is usually top 2. And here, let me explain. The Pokemon in Gen 1 are amazing. Pros, all the starters are amazing. The Pidgey line, the Pikachu line, the Sandshrew line, Nidoran lines, the Growlithe line, the Abra line, the Ghastly line, the Voltorb line, and the Eevee line are all big pros for this generation. It does have some cons. The bug Pokemon in first gen were not that great, and honestly are what really turned me off of bug Pokemon for the most part. I mean, there's the exceptions like Scyther and Pinsir. I can't believe I'm doing this. There are the exceptions, yes. But for the most part, the bug Pokemon weren't that great. Anyways, Zubats are another con. I mean, Zubats are just horribly weak and so freaking annoying. And I've always hated Zubats. Golbat and Crobat, fine. Crobat didn't exist in first gen, by the way. But Zubats, ugh. And anyways, the Bellsprout line, the Grimer line, and the Coughing line all really suck. Now, Gen 1 got it right with legendaries. There were 4 of them, excluding Mew, because you can't get Mew normally. Perfect amount. I mean, you had the 3 legendary birds, and you had Mewtwo. That's it. That's all that's needed. Being legendary meant something, and the legendary Pokemon were obnoxiously stronger than everything else, especially Mewtwo. Mewtwo was easily the strongest in the game. And yes, I know in first gen Psychic types were way overpowered. But that kind of works still because Mewtwo was that much more powerful, and that's good. And then you have the gym leaders. The gym leaders were challenging. They were good, but honestly, the gym leaders weren't amazing. That's why Generation 1's not higher on the list. But the elites were very, very strong. They were good. They were where they should be. And then you had Team Rocket. Team Rocket, in my opinion, is probably, well, up until 6th gen, is probably the best. Oh, spoilers, by the way. Probably the best enemy team out there. Team Rocket's just classic. They have the greedy motivations, but they're sort of like very organized and very powerful too. They have influence, it seems, which made Team Rocket really cool. And then Giovanni was an amazing leader for them.